friends, welcome to It's Your Book Reviews. Today I'm going to review a book by Costevelos. Sorry if I say the name wrong. Called, and I'm going to say this in German because the word as I know it is German, Wanderlust. Look at this gorgeous cover. This is so beautiful. Now, Wanderlust, in this book, it's the name of a world, but the German word Wanderlust basically means the desire to go hiking. So I thought that was really interesting that she had chosen that name for her book, for her world and for her book. So this book was released 2019 and it is self-published as far as I know. This review will probably be a little longer than my other reviews because there's a lot I have to say about this book. And also, here's a warning, there will be spoilers. If you do not wish to hear spoilers, you may want to see this review after you've read the book. The story is about love, about happiness, about how to change your life when you're unhappy, how to take control of your life, and how to be strong in the face of difficulties and leading an unhappy life, and how to claim your happiness. So the theme and the why, the idea behind this book is a very strong one. So let's dive in. Let's start with the world. The world building is fantastic. The world is very richly imagined. It's very vivid. I can completely see the world that she goes into. It is very well described, very detailed. I really love the world building in this book. There are some lines in this book that are really beautiful, and I just wanted to give one example because I really love this line. I'm going to read this off for you. What if I didn't want to be fixed? What if I wanted to stay broken and detached and unhinged forever, because being complete would only bring back a nostalgic little feeling that would break me all over again? This line is so deep and it really speaks to me. It really gives us this deep connection to this character and how she feels and how she's scared to move forward with her life. She's scared to accept the positive in her life because she knows what it feels like to be broken and she doesn't want to go there again. And that is so well captured in this line. And there's lines throughout like that that are really deeply emotional, really connecting to the reader, connecting the character to the reader. Really well done. Now, I really love killing characters myself in my stories, but actually reading about a major character dying is hard. I don't get that very often in novels, which is probably why I'm not used to that, and why it really struck me so intensely. The death of the major character in this novel was really, really well done. There was a lot of depth to the loss of this character, and we could really, really get into the emotional side of this with the main character about this other major character's death. We were really with her there, and it was not something that was glossed over and handled quickly. It was a slow descent into the agony of losing a person that is very, very dear to you. So thumbs up, that was awesome. Well done. The story itself, the plot, is amazing. I loved the story. I loved it. The story does not have a 100% happy ending, which is rare in books. At least I haven't seen it a lot. So to me, that is a plus. I loved it, even though I hate it. Not happy endings are not cool, but they're awesome. So I love it. Okay, moving on to the parts that I think could have used more work. I had minor issues with character believability here and there, but I'm not going to go into that too much because it was really no biggie. Okay, one of the biggest concerns I had was clarity and inconsistencies. I will be giving a lot of examples here because this was really a huge issue in the book. So first example. In chapter 2, Rain describes the attack of a dead woman. At first she grabs her neck, but then she moves her hands, plural, both hands, up to her face and rip apart her lips and moves inside and down her throat. At no time after that is it described that the woman moves her hands back to the throat. Yet afterwards, Rain describes to have scars on her throat, scratches on her neck, seemingly from the dead woman's stranglehold. And so that's unclear to me how she got all these bruises and scratches, because the woman held her very briefly there. She quickly moved up and then invaded her mouth and her throat from the inside. So how there can be scars on the outside is a little unclear to me. Overall, the narrative is vague at times and overdramatic at other times. For example, Dan backed away, his jaw stapled to his chest. His jaw stapled to his chest. And my teeth powdered to dust. What is that supposed to tell us? I don't know. So some of these wordings are either too extreme or too vague, a little over dramatic, over the top, and there's a lot of them. And the reader will think, does she mean it literally? Or, for example, clinging to the melting banister. I mean, in this world, a lot of things are possible too, and we get to know pretty quickly that this is a very quirky, strange world. I'll give you another example that shows this a little more clearly. So here's this line on page 165. I craned my neck to see inside. I could almost make out the chandelier dangling from the ceiling. An easel was set up in the middle. My lips cracked. Beneath it was a thin blue sheet. So that line in itself is very unclear. First, my lips cracked is not clear enough. Do the lips literally crack, like split open from dryness or whatever, or they crack in terms of the jaw opening like in awe, or maybe in disbelief. We don't really know what she's feeling in the moment. That doesn't really come through clear enough. My lips cracked, that sentence is plastered kind of randomly in amidst all of this description without anything to connect to. We don't know how she's feeling. We don't know exactly what her lips are doing or what she's doing and why, how she's reacting to this emotionally, internally. It seems random and just like another thing in the narrative that gives us a bodily reaction, which is actually happening a lot in this book, and I think it's a little overdone. Because when we have all these bodily reactions, we want to know what happens internally as well, and without that connection, it feels more random than otherwise, most of the time. Okay, the next thing is beneath, beneath it was a thin blue sheet. Beneath what? The chandelier? The cracked lips? The easel? And a thin blue sheet of what? Ice? The place that she's entering was described as built from ice, I believe, or has a lot of ice in it, so we can assume that it might be a sheet of ice. But it could also be, it could be a cloth, it could be a carpet, it could be throw up, it could be anything, because this world is so richly imagined and quirky, and it could be, a layer of melted creature corpses. It could be anything, but we're not told. And then the scene moves on. There are other little clarity issues, for instance, the jumper scene. On page 69, Rain, or maybe this is more of a consistency issue really than a clarity issue, but she sits next to the jumper and it says, plagued with anxiety, I lowered my head as the creature continued towards the jumper, the place I sat adjacent to. But then on page 71, she runs, trying desperately to get to the jumper, which she just sat next to 2 pages ago, and we hadn't seen her move from it since. she swerves past a tree and then runs as fast as she can until she bursts into the room with the jumper in it. So she's not even in the same room on page 71. And we haven't seen her move out of the room. So these little inconsistencies are peppered here and there as well. A couple of things for clarity for the reader also, names or things that are particular to the world. Sometimes Rain knows what they mean. For instance, the term Repsil. She understands what that means, but then later we learn how she learned what it meant. So I understand that the narrator is standing in a future moment retelling this story, but the reader might not necessarily remember that, or it might not be at the forefront of their mind, and they will get confused. So it would be helpful if the reader could learn the word alongside with the character. So I would have just either given an explanation earlier, just a brief little thing for the reader, or held off on using that term. There's also this character Morgana, who shows up later in the book, and we're supposed to know her, and I didn't remember her, and it would have been really helpful for the reader to have a reminder of who Morgana was before she reappears. So clearly she must have appeared earlier in the book. I did not, and I read the book fairly quickly too, and I have a really good memory, which is why my strength in revision with my clients is finding plot holes and finding inconsistencies. But I could not remember this character Morgana, so her mention must have been very, very brief. It would have been helpful to have a little descriptor at that point when she was mentioned again, to be reminded who she is. The flower garden was a little unclear to me. That could have used a little more clarity. I'm not going to go into any details now because this video is already going to get super long. The biggest issue that I had was who the narrative was told to. So Rain is speaking to psychologists. I believe she's also speaking to a officer at some point, but mostly she's speaking to the psychologists, but she's also telling the story to her unborn child Mia. And sometimes it is hard to tell who she's talking to and how much of the story is told to the psychologists. Are they getting the whole story, or is she only giving them little bits and most of the rest is for Mia? For Mia's ears only. It's not always clear. I mean, she tells the psychologists, apparently, it appears that she tells the psychologists so much, but then they have very reserved reactions. For example, she tells this whole story of how she met the dead woman, and the first thing out of the psychologist's mouth is, "You started seeing things?" And that's written as a question, not an observation. And we're left as a reader thinking, why, yes. Weren't you listening? I just told you the story. I just told you that I saw things. Then once in a while, she addresses the person she's telling the story to with Mia within the narrative. So is she telling the story to Mia, or is she telling the story to the psychologists? Or is she saying Mia while talking to the psychologists? Well, that wouldn't make sense because for the longest time she's keeping secret that she's pregnant. So how much of the narrative is going to the psychologist's ears and how much is not? That was the greatest issue I had with reading this, because that was confusing and misleading and completely unclear. Another bigger thing that became an issue for me was the logistics around her killing Nicholas. So she spends 13 days with him, then goes back, then 2 days later goes back to Wanderlust, but now she has blood on her fingers, so she must have gone within those 2 days, but not known about it? Well, why didn't she notice the blood before she goes back 2 days later? Was Nicholas's corpse just left there for 2 days, or for whatever time frame passed between her last visit and her final visit, the visit where she killed him and that final one? Because when she gets there to find him dead, it feels immediate. It feels like it just happened. But when she finds out that it was her who killed him, then we get the impression that it was not quite so immediate. So that's confusing. And then Dan also claims that she'd only been gone for 2 days, not 13 days. And that time discrepancy is never explained. So that adds to the confusion. How did this work? This whole killing Nicholas, being in one world 13 days, being in the other world for 2 days, maybe not. We're not sure how much time she spent in either place and how time moves when she's in the other place. That part needed a little more clarity at that point in the book. Also, I was confused by the rumbling and shaking of the palace when she returns to find Nicholas dead. The castle is falling kind of apart when she gets there, and I wondered, was that Esme's doing? And if so, why was she doing this? And then it just stops and nobody ever talks about it anymore. It felt like just forced drama with no other story reason. Speaking of Esme, Rain, towards the end of the book, Rain can say her name again, and we don't know why. We're not told why she can suddenly say her name again, and she doesn't wonder about that. So Rain herself has no reaction to that. I thought that the mentioning of her finger movements in the beginning of the book created a lot of mystery that I really loved. As I was reading on through the book, I kept wondering, why is she doing this with her fingers? What does that mean? That was great that was kept secret for such a long time. In a way, it was really frustrating, but it was a good frustration. I really wanted to figure out what that was about. Now, when we got to the resolution of that, I couldn't quite connect to the motivation in it. It was lovely that referred to the piano lesson that she had with Nicholas, but I was wondering, why did that so much stick with her? Is it because this was her last happy memory that she had of being with him, or has it some other reason that we're not aware of? That would have been great if that was included too, to get a better sense of why that was kind of her calming and grounding movement that she does throughout the book. So we're coming towards the end. There are only 2 more things I want to mention. The first one is, at the very end of the book, she says, "It was the only way to keep you safe, Mia, but then something changed." This is great. Wonderful. However, we're not told what changed. So instead of telling us what changed, she makes this vague comment. "An unexpected combination of events that causes my soul to quiver as the clerk stands behind me." What does that mean? What combination of events? The only thing that happens between her incarceration and the present moment is her telling her story to Mia or to the psychologists. That's it. So what changed for her that she decided that she wants to take care of Mia, that she wants to keep her and live on? And lastly, now that we've gone through all the developmental stuff, I wanted to say that this book needed, or is in desperate need of, a line edit. There are many, many, many present participles in this book. Let me give you some examples of a line that could use some line editing. Okay, for example, "Settling on the tree closest to me, my heart shriveled to dust." The eyes that Aline Pyre rake over sunflowers are probably the ones doing the settling, but grammatically this reads as if her heart settles on the tree closest to her. And also, "it shriveled to dust" is another overdramatic moment, like the melting banister earlier. Another example. "Not giving me an opportunity to finish, I stared after her streaked white tail as she stomped off into the crowd." She is a creature with the head of a badger. Can you see where the sentence gets it all wrong? Not giving me an opportunity to finish. Who's doing that? The creature with the head of the badger. I stared after her. Who is doing that? The narrator. Grammatically speaking, these two half sentences cannot be combined. So grammatically this reads, while I gave myself no opportunity to finish, I stared after her. How could we fix this line? It could go something like this. Not giving me an opportunity to finish, she stomped off into the crowd as I stared after her. This would be the same line, but grammatically correct. Is it pretty? Not necessarily. Let's try and make this a bit stronger. She didn't give me an opportunity to finish, but stomped off into the crowd, and I stared after her streaked white tail. Now that's a little bit better. That's a little bit of a stronger line. We don't have the present participle in there. We have clarity on who is doing what, and it's just a smoother line because we see exactly what the badger-headed creature is doing versus what Rain is doing. One is stomping off, the other one is looking after the creature. There are probably a million ways of making this an even stronger line and an even prettier line. I'm just giving a general example of how we could improve that line. Phew, that was a lot. So there you have it. This is Wanderlust by Costevelos, and again, I'm sorry if I'm saying the name wrong. Okay. Final thoughts. I think this story is absolutely wonderful. If you can look past the stylistic choices the author has made here and look past the grammar issues in the book and don't mind the missing clarity here and there, this will be a really, really captivating read. The story is fantastic. The world is phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I would have given it a full 5 stars if those issues hadn't been there. If the story or the world were lacking, I would have given it much less than I am going to. The way it is now, I'm giving it a full 4 stars because the story is really strong, the theme is really strong, and the world building is really strong. The characterization is good, it could be better. And then there is the clarity and really, really needing a line edit. So those 2 pieces is what bumped it down from a 5-star to a 4-star. But it is definitely, I will recommend it. It is a really, really fun read. Wanderlust by Costevelos. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.